It's so wonderful to be here at this centennial celebration, and so great to see all of you this morning. Students, congratulations, and faculty, congratulations, and parents and grandparents, and children, congratulations. Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you for the Board of Trustees and this honor of entrusting part of the task of this university and extending that to the arts. You can't waste God's gift, can you? Was what she said to me. Though I was born in Boston, I spent most of my childhood years in Japan and returning to U.S. as a 13-year-old. In Lincoln Middle School, now a police building, in New Providence, New Jersey, my journey back to the U.S. began. Although I had American citizenship, my English was very, very limited. My English teacher, Mrs. S., somehow found out that I was good at drawing. So she decided that I would work on a bulletin board project rather than sitting through an almost incomprehensible class. She gave me magic markers and asked me to copy paintings that related to the particular theme that the class was discussing. One of those works she gave me to copy was Emanuel Lietz's Washington Crossing the Delaware, which is inserted in your bulletin. By drawing this painting, I did not realize that I would be literally drawing out my life's calling. For budding artist, Lietz's work is a wonderful introduction to the artistry of painting. And copying a masterwork is one of the best ways to learn to paint and learn to see. This particular work has dramatic visual tension built in, with compositional elements made up of triangles and parallelograms, creating both movement and action. Copying it, though, I discovered that the painting had hidden features and visual structure that I could not capture with magic markers. I remember also struggling to capture George Washington's distinct nose and facial expression. I did the best I could with the materials given, and the experience remains fresh in my mind. I can still, as I talk about this, smell those markers today. I must have done a fairly good job of it because my teacher, Mrs. S., brought in other teachers to show it off. I could tell that she was very proud of me. One day she brought a friend who was a substitute teacher, someone that I had never met before and someone that I never saw again. After looking at the work, she turned to me and said, "You can't waste God's gift, can you?" I remember her face, her countenance, even to this day. Was my art a gift? Was she right? Did I have a gift from God? Who is this God? Am I not to waste God's gift? At that moment, what she said to me seemed perfectly reasonable, even though I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I knew early on that art was a gift. Even as a young child, I sensed that art was my calling. And whenever I painted or drew, I felt some force go through me that was not mine. I knew that this was a gift. So on that day when she said that, what the substitute teacher said made sense to me. But it took me many years after that to find out who was behind this source of calling. Many years later, more recently, I sat in a museum in Puerto Rico as a member of the National Council on the Arts. I found myself representing the United States arts agencies. I had a unique opportunity to reflect again on this substitute teacher's words due to a surprising confluence of events all surrounding this Lutze painting that reshaped my life. I was listening to a report on a project called Picturing America. The head of National Endowment for the Humanities, Bruce Cole, was making a presentation, and he brought out this painting. He spoke of Lutze's this painting as a particular focus on the Picturing America project. He said, young Americans no longer know the history of our nation. Know our paintings that help to tell the story. Bruce said these iconic masterworks no longer appear in textbooks. So young students no longer have access to the works. Now, I knew what the painting was about visually because I had copied it. And of course, the story of George Washington crossing the Delaware, not too far from here, on Christmas Day on 1776 as a last-gap effort to save the Revolution is well known. But I must confess that I did not know the background to Lutze's version of this story until I read and heard from Bruce, an art historian, during his Picturing America report. Bruce reminded us that Washington crossing the Delaware painting was being restored at the time and is now fully restored. And you can go to the American wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art to see it. It stands 11 by 21 feet. And the restored gilded frame, which is worthy of attention, a masterwork worth seeing in itself, surrounds it. Now, I hope that all of you today, this would be a charge for you to go see this painting. It's an extraordinary painting, extraordinary experience to see it, and there are details and theatrical movements that you will not get in the small reproduction. Bruce Cole noted that one of the greatest criticisms of this painting has been the inaccuracy of the details and the embellishment of the drama. The American flag, critics note, had not been created at the time of the crossing. The river does not look anything like the Delaware. In recent times, because of these critiques, the painting have been removed from many of the American history textbooks. Now, even as a middle school child, copying the painting, I knew that I was depicting a fictionalized retelling. You know, art does not capture reality as a whole. It is limited. So what artist does is carefully selects and retells and represents. Even a photograph can only capture one perspective of reality. An artist knows that paint can reveal stories through the limitation of the medium, and it is in understanding how to create within the boundary of those limitations that a masterpiece is made. Any historical accounting, as good historians will tell us, is also a retelling from the vantage point of that historian's perspective. So in the retelling, what makes this art a masterpiece? Further, why would I want to tell you about this painting and the artist Emmanuel Lutze as a graduation message to you? Through the Picturing America project, I discovered there is a story of this art that is worth telling as an inspirational North Star for you as you cross your river this morning, journeying into the future unknown. So here's a background story that the pundits do not mention. No, I don't think they fully understand. Emmanuel Lutze was not an American painter. He was born in Germany, but he did spend his childhood years in America. In fact, in Philadelphia, not too far from here. When he was 13, his father became ill. And as his father lay dying, he had the unfortunate duty of being assigned to be by his deathbed. Having not much to do, except to watch his father die? The 13-year-old Emmanuel sat by the bedside and began to sketch his father's face by depicting the death of a loved one. Emmanuel found his life's calling. A year later, in order to support himself and his family, young Emmanuel began painting portraits for $5 apiece. He later received formal education from John Rubens Smith, a portrait painter in Philadelphia. Here's what Bruce Cole says about the painting. In Emanuel Litzer's painting, the commander of the Continental Army against Great Britain stands boldly near the prow of a crowded boat and navigates the treacherous Delaware River on Christmas night, 1776. The Declaration of Independence had been signed earlier that year in the summer heat of Philadelphia. And through the sobering autumn months, General Washington led an army of dwindling numbers with defeats mounting and morale sinking. Barrymore Schurer, who writes for the Wall Street Journal, wrote about this painting as well, and this is what he said. At Trenton, New Jersey, was garrisoned a large force of Hessian mercenaries paid by the Briton. Washington decided upon a surprise attack. First, he needed to get his troops across the Delaware River from McConkey's Ferry, Pennsylvania, to Johnson's Ferry, New Jersey, during the freezing night of December 25th and 26th. Beginning about sundown, a small flotilla of cargo boats plied the ice-choked waters through the night until 2,400 troops had been ferried across for the march to Trenton. There, in the early hours of the morning, the Continental forces surprised the sleeping garrison, and after a brief but a fierce engagement, captured nearly 2/3 of the Hessians. This victory saved the revolution by raising the morale of the Continental troops and attracting new enlistments. And Schurer continues about Emanuel Lotze. In 1841, Lotze returned to Germany, enrolling in the Royal Academy in Düsseldorf, where he eventually became a professor. In 1848, Lotze was inspired to pay tribute to the spirit of independence by parallels in German current events. That year, revolution had spread throughout Europe. In German Confederation, liberal factions had hoped to overthrow the conservative thrones to create a unified German nation. Imagine what would have happened to the world if they succeeded. But they did not. They failed. But out of this political defeat rose an artistic triumph. So Lotze painted this image as a bicultural artist, depicting objectively what American democracy can mean to an outsider. The painting was never meant to be simply a historical account. He needed to depict not only Washington Crossing as a historical reality, but to capture the very essence and ideal of democracy itself. What Lotze wanted to convey to his friends was a picture of America, led by destiny and extraordinary leadership, with a diverse coalition of unlikely heroes, gathered together in a single boat, cast into the icy waves. Let's go into the boat together, shall we? Notice who's in the boat. Of course, there's George Washington and his aide, Colonel James Monroe, by his side. But at the front and the back of the boat are two figures wearing buckskin trousers and moccasins, Native Americans, leading the way. In front of George Washington is an African American, rowing on the far side. And next to him is a man with a Scottish bonnet. And this figure rowing close to you on the right side of Monroe, this figure in red, many historians suspect that this is a woman rowing. You see, Lutze was depicting a picture of America. As a visual way to incarnate the American ideal to his homeland in Germany, he intentionally did not paint the Delaware. No, he is in Germany. This is the Rhine. So today, if you go to the American Hall, the Metropolitan Museum, you see this iconic work by a German artist, a foreigner's painting of a land and image far away, recording an evening that answered the call to destiny. It was not created by a local patriot painting a nationalistic image, but an outsider peering in, much in the same way that Alexis de Tocqueville reimagined America as a Frenchman in 1835 with words which resonate today, even in this cynical 21st century. This is what Alexis de Tocqueville said about America. America is great because she is good. If America ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. That day in Puerto Rico, after Bruce Cole told us of the historic background to this painting, I had to raise my hand. I shared this. Bruce, I find it remarkable that I am sitting here with you to represent the United States of America in our journey to advocate for the arts and culture. What you told of this painting is so meaningful to me because I am an artist, partly because of this painting. I told the group about my experience copying this masterpiece with magic markers and what I learned by doing so and what my substitute teacher told me. You can't waste God's gift. I told the members of the gathering that these words and painting illumined my heart as many years later I stood over another river, Twin Rivers or Tamagawa on the outskirts of Tokyo. I had just become a Christian through the influence of my wife, the church that she was attending, and rereading of William Blake. I spoke to Dr. Masters about this. I thank Bruce for his work in bringing this masterpiece once again to influence countless youth who will use the Picturing America materials. You never know what a painting or an encouraging word by a substitute teacher can do to shape a young person's life. We live in a country and the world where it is still possible for that to happen. The American promise and her experiment continues, and it is still a gift. It is a gift of entrepreneurship and the courage to create new wineskin. And it is a story of independence and leadership. The fact that we can enjoy this day, just a few miles away from where Washington dared to take his troops across, is a testament to the movement of destiny and to the individual choices and faith that guided such decisions. You, Cairn students, represent the future that Washington fought to create. You are the embodiment of an ideal that Emmanuel Lutze tries so desperately to depict, despite the failures of democracy in his own land. You can't waste God's gift. I was 13 when I heard those words, just as Emmanuel Lutze was 13 when he drew his dying father and discovered his gift. You will be given many opportunities in your life to reshape somebody else's life. Perhaps even the life of a 13-year-old boy who struggles with his English. Do not take those moments for granted. Use the gift that God gave you to the fullest and be faithful. Your education and your experience here at Cairn are markers that guide the path uniquely paved for you. Be confident of that journey. George Washington faced the tyranny of oppression and the imposition of an old system. Today, we too face similar oppression and imposition of an old system. But in our case, it is the icy remains of the industrial age that is behind us. The ice chunks floating in a river called what I call utilitarian pragmatism. Utilitarian pragmatism is the type of thinking that constructs the point of education only to train us to survive in a materialist universe, as if the future is predetermined by our limited resources. In other words, you're only valuable as your usefulness to the society. When we think like that, we can only see gray skies of fear all about us. And it does not reflect the biblical path of valuing all people as made in the image of God. Utilitarian pragmatism can speak even today in a graduation day. It's the voice that says, well, your dreams, your ideals, and your art, what you call the beautiful may be nice to think about. But now you're going to have to face the real world. You're going to have to buckle up and be an adult, after all. My friends, if George Washington thought that way, we would not be here at all. Washington, too, faced the real world head on, but he also dreamt of another. Emanuel Lutze wanted to paint America filled with opportunities, not a world that is facing her deathbed. In other words, he did not want to depict a world that is dying, but a world that is about to be birthed. This painting is generative. From every visual angle, every figure depicted points to an infinitely vast universe in which imagination and dreams meet the daunting challenge of any age, any culture, any country. Today, it is your dreams and your art that can break open the thick, stubborn ice of utilitarian pragmatism and the cynical naysayers of our time clogging up the river toward joy-filled thriving. Today is a Genesis moment. Every life of a graduate can become God's artwork. This moment, though this is the end of your time here at Cairn, is a fresh start to a new adventure. Unknown, yet hoped for. Perhaps thought to be impossible by some, yet earned and yearned for. Sure rights of that world. Lutze framed both Washington and Monroe's heads and the beautifully painted flag against the radiant background of the dawning sky. In addition to highlighting the composition's climactic passage, its symbolism is apparent. Washington and his men move toward the light of hope, guided by the morning star. You can barely see it in the upper left-hand corner, but in the actual painting, it's very bright. This morning star, which, given the Christmas connection, suggests the star of Bethlehem. What I noticed as a young artist was that this painting does not work in a normative way. There is something unusual, even strange, about the perspective. What I did not know when I was copying the work as a 13-year-old was that the Lutze's first painting of this scene was destroyed in a fire. What we see at the Met is the second painting, one that was slightly altered in perspective. I did not know about that fire. A fire can destroy, but a fire can also sanctify. Notice Washington's face. Originally, the face looked ahead toward the vista, toward the unknown, and the clouds opened directly above, and there was no North Star. In this second rendition, let's change the horizon slightly. He dropped it to make a miracle happen in this painting and added the North Star. The artistic miracle is this. Washington's gaze is simultaneously both toward the horizon and to the North Star. It's a dual perspective. And as you face the unknown horizon of your own this graduation day, I encourage you to have this dual perspective. And to do what Washington's visage does somewhat miraculously because of a limited two-dimensional space of a painting, you can look straight at your challenges and the impossibilities and fears, even what seems to be a dark abyss at the edge of the world. But at the same time, you can look at the North Star, the Star of Bethlehem. We must do so today. Faced with the incalculable challenges of our days, we have no choice. We may feel in our bones the cold winter wind, as George Washington did on that day, guiding a ragtag team of revolutionaries, many of them young, untrained farmers and craftsmen. We may be severely limited in resources. We may not even have an iconic flag, or maybe a brand new name to a university. We do have that. But perhaps we realize that this day, on the centennial celebration, yes, our existence is certainly fragile. And the river you cross may be frozen and dangerous. But George Washington's resolute face reveals a man who believed that destiny could still guide, and his leadership revealed a man who understood not only military strategy, but also the art of leadership. The art of creating so many iconic moments in history, even through his own failures, that would be etched into the hearts of all those who seek freedom. You can't waste God's gift. George Washington did not. Emanuel Lutzer did not, as they walked and led a different path. May Christ, the author and perfecter of your faith, guide you to cultivate your gifts, and may God show you that North Star. May the Spirit Creator reveal your destiny and lead you into the freedom of the unknown. Thank you.